Imagine walking through the dense rainforests of modern Ecuador. Now strip away every tree, every bird, every modern sound, and replace it with the heavy thud of footsteps from an animal the size of a small car. Giant ground sloths, hundreds of them. Living in herds, grazing, roaming a prehistoric landscape that feels like something out of an alien planet. But here's where the story takes a sharp turn. Because in one particular place, known today as Loma, something catastrophic happened. Paleontologists didn't just find one skeleton here. They didn't even find a dozen. They found thousands. Piled together, tangled. A chaotic jumble of massive bones belonging to these peaceful plant eaters. At first, it looked like the work of time and chance, bones scattered over centuries. But then, researchers noticed something strange. The skeletons were in remarkably similar conditions. The same orientation, similar levels of preservation. This wasn't random. This was a single event, or at least a repeating trap. And the cause of death? That's where the mystery deepened. Giant ground sloths were slow, but they were smart enough to avoid obvious hazards. So what could have taken out hundreds of them at once? Volcanic eruption? No ash layers? Flooding? No sediment patterns matched? Predators? Not a chance. These animals were too big to be hunted in mass, and no predator leaves a graveyard this clean. One theory chilled researchers. A toxic pool. Imagine a low, swampy basin rich in volcanic gases like carbon dioxide. You wouldn't see it. You wouldn't smell it. But you'd breathe it in, and within minutes you'd collapse. If a single sloth stumbled into this basin, it would never crawl out. Others, perhaps family members or curious herd mates, might follow, and the invisible killer would claim them too. Over time, the basin became a death zone, a silent, invisible predator. The more scientists examined the site, the stranger it got. Some sloth skeletons had twisted limb positions, like they'd collapsed mid-stride. Others were locked in poses suggesting convulsions. This wasn't just death. This was sudden, violent, and, to us, almost theatrical. But nature doesn't care for drama. Only cause and effect. And it turns out Loma wasn't unique. Across the fossil record, bizarre deaths are more common than you might think. Take, for example, the fighting dinosaurs from Mongolia, a fossilized velociraptor and protoceratops, locked in combat, claws in flesh, jaws around limbs. They were buried mid-battle, likely by a collapsing sand dune. In that frozen moment, predator and prey died together, forever immortalized in stone. Or the whale graveyards found in Chile's Atacama Desert. Hundreds of perfectly preserved skeletons, all killed by massive toxic algae blooms millions of years ago. The same red tides that still sometimes kill fish today once wiped out entire pods of prehistoric whales. The fossil record is more than just bones. It's a diary of tragedy. But here's where this story turns from sad to haunting. In paleontology, we're taught to think about how an animal lived. But these sites force us to think about how they died, when the cause is invisible, like poison gas, or instantaneous, like a dune collapse. It shakes our sense of control. Because if it happened to them, could it happen to us? But before we jump to modern fears, let's return to Loma. The sheer number of sloths here suggests this wasn't a one-time catastrophe. It was a recurring killer, a death trap working over centuries. Each generation losing more to the same fate. When we think of extinction, we often imagine slow declines, a changing climate, dwindling food, predators gaining the upper hand. But some deaths in the fossil record happened in moments, freak events that defy the normal rules of nature. One such event comes from Germany's Messel Pit, a fossil site famous for its perfect preservation. Here, animals from 47 million years ago lie so complete, you can still see the outlines of their fur and feathers. But many of these creatures, from tiny bats to ancient horses, were found with their heads twisted back, mouths open and limbs curled tight. The cause? Volcanic lake, releasing bursts of carbon dioxide? Just like Loma's toxic swamp. These clouds silently rolled over the surface, suffocating anything in their path. One moment alive, the next gone. Falling into the water, sinking into the mud, and slowly becoming a fossil. And then there's the tragedy of the death posture. a haunting position seen in many fossilized dinosaurs. When an animal dies in certain conditions, muscles contract as they dry, pulling the head back over the spine in a dramatic curve. It's not how they lived, but it's how we remember them, frozen in their final moment. But some bizarre fossil deaths involve not just nature, but other animals. In China, paleontologists discovered a small raptor that had apparently choked to death. On a bird? The bones of its last meal were lodged so perfectly in its throat that it never had the chance to swallow. Death by ambition. And then there is the darkly ironic case of predatory fish fossilized mid-bite, attacking prey while another predator attacked them. One moment you're the hunter, the next you're the hunted. Not all strange fossil deaths are ancient. Some are surprisingly recent in geological terms, like the rediscovery of a male Sewenka's water frog in Bolivia after decades of presumed extinction. While not fossilized, his survival tells us something about the fragility of life, and how close we come to losing entire species without ever knowing their full story. The fascination with bizarre deaths isn't just morbid curiosity, it's about connection. Fossils aren't just bones, they're evidence of lives lived and lost. They remind us that life, no matter how mighty, can end in the most unexpected ways. And perhaps that's the lesson. The giant ground sloths, the fighting dinosaurs, the suffocated horses, the choking raptor. They all lived at the mercy of forces they couldn't predict. Just like us. When you look at a fossil, you're not just seeing a creature. You're re-seeing the final chapter of its story, written in stone by nature's hand. So next time you hear about a fossil discovery, don't just ask, what is it? Ask, how did it die? Because sometimes, that's where the real story is.